This is the tutorial on the Maya cleanup process when you're at the point where you want to export from Maya into a game engine. And this is for any game engine: Ogre, Torque, Unreal, Half-Life, etc. So this is a general checklist that you should go down every time that you're going to export. First thing you want to do is bring up your outliner. I have a hotkey mapped to mine, and if you don't have a hotkey for yours, just go up here to Window and drop down to Outliner. And that should bring it up for you as well. Now what I've done is I've created several objects, and rather than just kind of screwing them up and saying here's how to fix it, I also want to include in the tutorial how things can get sort of messed up. By the way, what I'm going to be using here are some universal hotkeys in Maya, and I suggest you get used to them as well. When you select an object in Maya and you have one or several things selected, if you press F, it will frame just those objects that you have selected. So if I select one of these and move it, press F, I'm going to go close up and personal on that object alone. When I press A, it frames all the objects, and that's a really good way to make sure that you've got everything on your screen, because we're going to be combining objects, and you want to make sure that you don't have one object, such as this little straggler here, kind of off the screen and you don't see it, and so you kind of forget about it. What you want to do is you want to press A so that you're looking at all your objects. Now the first thing we want to do is we want to grab all of these objects and combine them. And again, this needs to happen before you do any texture mapping. If you've already done your texture mapping, if you've already laid out your UVs, chances are good you're going to have to do it again or do some modification if you've created other objects, if you have several meshes in the scene. So in this case I do have this. I have several meshes, some of which are readily visible here in the outliner by this little tiny blue mesh with a cross in it. Other ones are well hidden, and they're hidden underneath groups. And groups are very dangerous because if you go over here and you press on the plus sign here in the outliner, it will extend open what is in that group. But this is not readily apparent when you bring up the outliner. So you can have these two objects hidden under groups. You don't see them on your outliner, and you erroneously can grab just these, combine those while completely missing these as well. So the first thing I like to do is to go in here to the perspective view and press A. That will usually show you all of your objects, and at that point I like to drag a big box over the entire screen, and what it does is it selects every object on screen. To verify that I've selected every object, you can use the same A and F hotkeys in the outliner as you do in the perspective window. Now be aware that when you click in the outliner window, you're going to immediately lose your previous choice. So if you've done that, press Z, which is a universal key for undo, and it will select all of your Maya objects again as you had them. With this outliner window selected, if it's not selected, notice how this is sort of grayed out and the outliner window is now this sort of robust pearish blue. That's going to show you what current window you have up. I'm flipping between the two by pressing on their title bars. When you have something selected in Maya, don't click in the outliner window, as I was saying. Click on the title bar of the outliner window. That means you've enabled the outliner. It's now to the forefront. Any universal key you press will apply just to the outliner. And that's important because I've seen people do this. They select three things, then they come in here to try and activate the outliner window, and they'll press on something, losing their selection and selecting this. So what you want to do is select everything that you need to on the screen, then go in here and just click the title bar to bring up the outliner. Then what we're going to do is press F. Remember, F is frame what you have selected, but it will show everything you have selected in the outliner. It will reveal things. Even if they're way, way down in the hierarchy, it will reveal them here in your outliner. And that's a great way to make sure that you know what's going on before you combine something. To combine things, make sure that you're in the modeling portion of Maya. You can do that by going up here to this little window here and dropping it down into modeling. You can either do that, or you can use the built-in hotkeys for Maya, F2, F3, F4, and F5, and that will switch between them. There we go. So when you're in the modeling window, go to Polygons and drop down to the third selection. It's called Combine. And when you combine them, you're going to see one brand new object. At this point, what I'd like you guys to do is to make sure that you double click on that name, and you can do so either in the outliner or you can do it over here in the channel editor. It doesn't matter. See? You just double click in the middle of the name, and usually it grabs the name for renaming, and name it something specific. And make sure that you are naming the object as per your asset list. Ask your team captain about what the name of the object is, because you need to make sure that it's got the exact name that you've delineated already on the sheet. And make sure that you don't get clever and use periods or spaces, because you can't. And make sure that everything is lowercase, because you never know what kind of engine is going to get hinky with capitals. So I like to use underscores if you have to separate two words, and I like to use lowercase for everything. So we renamed this object. It's now one entire object. When I select any of these, it selects the entire mesh, because this is now one polygonal mesh. It's a big mesh. The next thing you want to do is go up here into Edit, and drop down to Delete All by Type. Go to History. When you do that, it will delete all of the history that accrues, sometimes as sort of empty objects or empty groups, which means it's retaining the history of the fact that this was once separate objects. You don't need that anymore. You want to nuke history, because again, that can cause problems if that gets exported into a game engine that does not understand Maya's indigenous format for preserving the history. So now we have this thing here, which is an empty group. And a good way to get to the bottom of a group that you've got in the outliner, by the way, is simply press the Shift key and then press the plus. Boom! It goes all the way, it opens up that hierarchy all the way to the bottom. And I can see at a glance here that I've got an empty group. You can do one of two things. What I would prefer is people go up here to File, Optimize Scene Size, go into the option box. When this comes up, make sure that you have as many things selected as possible. You've got empty constraints, pair blends, locators, rendering nodes, yada, the whole thing. Then press optimize. It'll say, look, action's not undoable. You sure want to do it? Absolutely, I do. And what it does is it tends to clean up a lot of the things that are unnecessary in your Maya scene. However, do not depend upon that to get rid of your groups. Just double, triple, quadruple check by going into the outliner and making sure that by hand you delete any groups that do not have objects. So now we have one object in this Maya scene, and it's what you need to export. Now it looks pretty good, but we're going to go through a couple more checks to make sure that this object is optimized for export into Maya. First thing we're going to check is to make sure that you've got all the proper amounts of vertices, that you don't have any runaway vertices, or you don't have any end-sided polygons. And what I mean by that is, and I don't just want to explain the problems and how to cure them. I want to show what might have been done to cause the problem in the first place. And I'm going to press 5 here on the Maya keyboard so that everything's got a nice hard shading on it. You can see things a lot easier that way. So let's say that someone grabbed a polygon here. This is a right-clicking on the object and getting this menu, holding down the right key. And you can drag to select any of the parts here that comprise this polygonal object. You can show the faces, and then it goes into face mode. And then with a left click in the middle of this, these kind of indicate Apple. These kind of indicate the parts of the polygon, and these little dots here indicate the middle of the polygon. So with this selected faces, you can then left click onto that little middle button, and it will select just that polygon. And you can extrude it outward, or you can go up here to Edit Polygons and say Extrude Face. Then going into the extrusion process, and it'll make sides on everything. Now the problem is, let's say someone does that by mistake. You'll notice that it's already created these tiny little infinitesimally small sides on this polygon, so that it doesn't stretch out like it did in the beginning, but it actually just pushes out with these new sides. The problem is, I've seen people more than not click on the extrusion process and then go, whoops, I selected the wrong polygon, and click off here into the ether. And what they've done, unfortunately, is they've created edges here, 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 and here. They've created new polygon objects that are usually so small you don't see them, especially if you were to go into object mode. What we are now in is component mode, showing what the polygon is comprised of. But were you to go up here into the shelf and click back into object mode, which just shows the polygonal objects, and click on that, you'll notice there's absolutely no indication that there are any extra polygons here. Because you don't see it's not showing the polygon faces. It's just showing the object as a whole. And people continue onward and they say, I'm going to work on this part now, etc. And there's no indication that there are these problem polygons here. How do you find that out? Well, the first way to do it is, again, left click, right click on the object, and keep the right button down so that you get this menu. Drag down to face, and you'll notice pretty quickly, okay, I got some problem polygons right there. Now how do we cure this thing? Well, you go, the way I like to get rid of that is, polygons. Go into cleanup and go into the option box here for cleanup, and this should give you, and make sure that you have the same parameters here. This should weld together anything that is that's too close. If the polygons basically have 0, 0, 0 space, cleaning it up basically welds them together. And then you can press close, go back into face, and these faces are now gone. So what it does is it basically says, yeah, in the entirety of this polygonal object, when you see tiny little polygon faces like that that just really have no length and width to them, weld the closest edges together, and that essentially gets rid of any stray polygon faces. But it's a good policy to stay in the face mode and just kind of travel around your object, making sure that you don't have any little strange hinky middle buttons on lines, because that usually means, okay, you got a couple extra faces in there. Now what I've done down here is I've actually artificially created a polygon, and I've done so by going here to Split Polygon Tool and click here and click there, and then I make a side. Okay, I already did that previously. I've just created another one. Now that in itself is not a problem, but again, people, what they do more than not is they'll click on the edge to get rid of it, and then they'll press the keyboard button delete. Now that gets rid of it ostensibly, but it doesn't really, because if we go into right button down, vertex mode, what you'll see is that it has created, and vertexes are essentially the little anchors that Maya puts onto polygon edges to draw new ones. So when I drew this polygon split here, it created this vertex edge and that vertex edge. The problem is that when I select the edge itself and delete it using the keyboard delete, that's wrong, and it leaves these extra vertexes exactly where you created them. And they're really not readily apparent when you're looking at the object like that, because I don't know why they chose a cool color on a cool color to show vertexes, but you can't really suss magenta on light blue. What I like to do is, again, in vertex mode, simply select as much as you can of the object and then spin around it that way, because you can see pretty much at a distance yellow on light blue. That means problem. The rest of these are these vertices are exactly where they should be, which is at the corner of two meeting polygons. That's okay. It's the ones that kind of leap out at you here and here that you need to get rid of. Now the way that I like to do that is a little trick where I simply click on it, and I suggest you do this in Wireframe, because unfortunately the way things happen in shaded is you can't see through the everything is perfectly opaque. So let's say by mistake you do this in shaded mode. You drag over that and you say, ha, I've selected that one, I want to delete it. Well, not really. If you look behind it, I've also selected the one directly behind it. The way to make sure you don't do that is select it in wireframe mode so you can see completely through the object. It's transparent. And you do this by pressing the keyboard button 4. It puts everything into a wireframe mode. Keyboard button 5 is hard shading, and keyboard button 6 is textured. Keyboard button 7 is textured with light. I have no lights in these scenes, so everything turns black. So I like to kind of wax between 4, 5, and 6. Where there are textures on this object, you'd be able to see them. But when you're selecting vertices, go for the wireframe mode. So when I select this, I've selected the first wayward vertice, and I can actually move it around. See, like this, kind of definitely messes with the polygon. What I like to do is selecting just that vertice and getting to a position where I can clearly grab just the yellow part of it. See, if I try to select the yellow axis, and I've got things like the Z arrow or the X arrow or the Y arrow or the X arrow in my way, chances are good that I'm going to frustrate myself trying to grab it, and I've actually grabbed just the I could grab just one of those arrows and not be able to freely rotate it or freely translate it as I want to. In fact, I would be grabbing one of these arrows which only let me move in one axis. So make sure that you're in a position where you can freely grab this. You're very aware that you do not grab any vertices behind the object, and that you can grab just the yellow part of the axis controls. You select just that vertice, and you press down and hold down the keyboard V for vertex or vertice, and then left clicking on the yellow ball, you want to move it until it snaps. See, holding the V down and then translating something means that that vertice is going to snap onto any other visible vertice that you've got in the camera window that you're currently looking through. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to snap it onto the nearest other legitimate vertice, which is the one right here. Make sure you know which one you're aiming for before you start snapping, because things can get silly awfully fast. And I'm going to grab this one as well, pressing down the keyboard V, and snap that one also to the nearest vertice that's legitimate. So pressing 5 and going into shaded mode, you can see now that I've taken these two, the vertice here and here, and just snapped them to this corner vertice, which is totally legitimate. And the reason I did that is because when I go back into object mode, and remember the object mode is up here, object and component, and the keyboard equivalent F8 does the same thing. If you have an object selected and you press F8, you go between faces and object, object, component, kind of cool. With it in object mode, I then go up here to edit polygons and then go down to merge vertices. And what this does is it says any vertices that are closer than this distance, merge them. Weld them together. And remember, I've got two vertices popped on top of this one, so what it's going to do, especially at this distance 0, 0, 1, is it's going to merge the vertices. So now what I've got down here is I've only got one vertex where originally there were several. So select the vertice, and you'll see I don't have several in there, I only have one. And that's a way to get rid of it. So what happens when you want to get rid of an edge? Well, here's the legitimate way to do it. You right-click on the edge and you choose Edges, and then you left-click on the edge. Choosing it, you do not press the keyboard Delete. Instead, you go up here to Edit Polygons, and you drop down to Delete Edge. And it will not only get rid of the edge, it will also get rid of any vertices. See, there aren't any extra vertices here nor here. So that's the legitimate way you want to get rid of those vertices. So a good check is to grab all the vertices of your object and just kind of tool around it and go, la la la, do I see any yellow points of light where it should not be? And if you're good, then wonderful. Now the other thing you want to do is to make sure that you've got polygons that have, and let's do this. Polygons that do not have more than 4 faces to them. This is a 4-sided polygon. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is a 3-sided polygon. 1, 2, 3. You cannot have more than you cannot have a 5-sided polygon, or as we say, an n-sided polygon. N meaning any number larger than 4. And this happens because when people go into, say, the split polygon tool, and they say, I'm going to create this edge to here and here. No, we just got rid of that. Is anything here. Now it's a 6-sided polygon. There you go. And while this does not look disturbing, this n-sided polygon is disturbing to possibly to several game engines. So what we need to do is we need to get rid of this thing. And they're polygons. Cleanup. Make sure you have this selected, and you can hit apply. And faces with more than 4 sides, it will automatically triangulate around it. Okay? Now, this is kind of messy. As you see, you've asked the computer to do the hard work for you. Look at all the repercussions it's done to split things up just to compensate for this silly little edge that you had there. So the better way to do it is choose yourself how you're going to split it up by going here to the Split Polygon tool under Edit Polygons, and this puts you into a mode where you can simply click on a polygon, causing a new vertex. You can slide it to the very edge. See, I'm not letting go of the left mouse button until it's right at the very edge. Bang, there. And then I click on another part of the polygon and I slide it down until there's an edge there. Bang. Now what I've done is I've got a 3-sided poly, 4-sided poly, 3-sided, and 4-sided. And I've delegated where those things go. Also, in case these are unnecessary lines, remember you can grab all 3 edges and go up here to Edit Polygons and then say delete edges. So there we are. So that looks pretty legit. The next thing you want to do, and go back into object mode for this, F8, F8. Go over here to File, Optimize Scene Size. I like to do this occasionally. It gets rid of a lot of stuff. And then go here to Delete All by Type, History. Make sure that's just completely empty. Now, one of the final steps that you want to do is two steps, is you want to delete all your unused materials. And you do this by going into Window, Rendering Editors, and I like to use the Multi-Lister. You can also use the Hypershade. It doesn't really matter, but I'll show you how to do it in both cases. With the Multi-Lister up, you need to go up here to Edit, Delete Unused. This will delete all the unused materials you have. Usually Optimize Scene takes care of this, but in case that missed it, go up here and make sure that you've got Delete Unused in the Multi-Lister, and it will get rid of all your unused shaders. Same thing also for Rendering Editors, and go into Hypershade. Oh my lord, look at that big old window. Let's shrink it down. Unused nodes. Boom. There you go. But there were none, so don't worry about it. And the last thing we need to do here is to make sure, take a look if you say that this object is too small and you scale it up like that, you say, okay, that's the size I want. Well, the problem is it's not really that size by default, which it needs to be now. Let's say that that's 100 feet high, and originally it was down here, and you've scaled it up. Okay, now it's 100 feet high. Well, if you export it, look over here in the channel area. You've got a translation value and a scaling of almost 10. In fact, we can just drag all these down and type in 10. Okay, now it's scaled 10, 10, 10. And when you export it like this, the game engine may revert it back to 1. So what you want to do is you want to freeze this so that that's the default. That's the default scale is 100 feet high or 100 meters high. To do that, scale it to the proper size that it should be, and then go in here to Modify, drop down to the third menu selection down, Freeze Transformations, go into the option box, and make sure that you have Translate and Rotate and Scale chosen. And what it will do then, take a look here at the channel box as I press the button. In fact, I'll shrink this down a bit. Take a look here what happens to the values when I freeze the transform. Boom. There. Now everything is 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and 1, 1, 1. Brilliant. That's the default size for this object. Make sure at this point that all your textures are good by pressing 7, because some of the operations may have messed up your texturing if you had a lot to fix. And you want to make sure it goes over just fine. I've included one button up here in the shelf, and that is going to help you to see what end-sided polygons you have. If you press that button, it will color everything that it has a legitimate quad yellow or green, and it will color all the triangulated polygons blue, and it will color any end-sided polygons red, dangerous, dangerous red. So you know, if you've got a texture on here, it does mess it up, but you can press Z and it will go back to the original color that was on there. So again, you can press this button up here and it will color all the bad polygons. In fact, I'll give you an example. Let's go in here and cause a bad polygon. Let's cause bad polygons. Here we are. So I'm going to create an end-sided poly again, right here. In fact, I'll create another one. Let's do it up here. There we go. And press this button, and boom, look, it colors things red that are now illegitimate polygons. So that's a good way of doing it. But again, use your own eyes, because you can't depend upon this little script, which may not be available for you later. It's just something that I put in the shelf. This is not a default Maya script. You can press Z, undo several times, it goes back to gray, and you can fix these edges with the ways that I've told you previously. The last bit of the tutorial dealing with normals on an object. Now the normals need to be projected in the direction that you're going to see them, because otherwise if the normal is reversed, you look right through the object. What is a normal? Well, basically a normal means this is the side of the polygon that will be rendered, and if you're looking behind it, it's essentially transparent. So you need to make sure that the normals are pointing towards the camera. How can you tell where the normal is? Well, go up here once you have your object selected, and make sure that you're in object mode, not component mode. Go up here to display, drop down to polygon components, and you can then drop down to normals. And each normal, as you can see with this little sort of morning star mace look, is like a bunch of hair or some spikes coming outward towards the camera. Now that's great. That's exactly what we want, meaning the normal is facing you, it will be rendered. However, depending on what happens during the course of modeling, if someone models something incorrectly, you may have a reverse normal. And how you can reverse normals, by the way, and don't follow me on this one because I'm actually doing it to kind of mess this object up, is you can see now that this normal here is reversed. Now how do we tell it's reversed? You can see it better on the wireframe. The little spike for it is pointing inward. So while it looks fine in Maya, gee, this is really nice, it's actually not going to render in the game engine. And a way to check that is go to Shading and enable Backface Culling. Make sure that's on. And what that will do is it will not render the back sides of objects. This is the best way to check very quickly whether your object has some hinky business or not. So in wireframe you can't see this, of course, but in shaded you can. And the best way to fix this, if there is indeed a polygon there, and we can always check by going into the object, and booyah, there it is. See, it's rendering in the wrong side. The way we can fix this is just go back out to the problem area, right click, right choose face with your mouse and select just that polygon. Now we go into Edit Polygons, drop down to Normals, and then go to Reverse, and that will reverse it outward. And now you can tell very quickly whether or not, back to Object Mode, whether or not your normals are all pointing outwards. And if you want to turn them off, because it's sort of strange to see that, you can go up here to Polygon Components Normals, and the same button that evokes them turns them off. I've written a small shelf button that will do this for you. It's this one here, and when you click it, the normals are shown. When you click it again, the normals disappear. But again, I want to teach you guys how to do it in Maya, because this is a custom tool that will not always be in Maya. It certainly is not in the PLE. So there's different ways of doing it, but you need to make sure that you have all your normals facing the camera. To check your materials, to make sure that your materials are named something other than the default Lambert shader, go up into Window, drop into Rendering Editors, and go into, I like to use the multi-lister. And if you create a shader for something and you click on Lambert, let's just give this a strange little color. Let's just give it a nice red or something that really pops. Okay, so there's our red. Close, and with my middle mouse button, I'm going to left mouse button, I select the shader. Middle mouse button, I simply drag it over onto the object. Ooh, nice. Okay, now that we know what shader this object has, the problem is it's named Lambert. Double click on it, and I would suggest that you go in to, let's say that the sphere needs to be named something. Mesh object. It's been named. What I'm doing here is I'm double clicking the name so that I select it, and I'm control copying it. And I'm going in here and double clicking on the shader name, control V, pasting it. You can also type it in just by double clicking on the shader name and then typing in mesh object. I like to type in mesh object underscore shader. Whatever it is, name it underscore shader. So now you have a shader that has been named, a custom named shader for the object. Then you go in here into the color itself, the material sample, and I would name it also mesh object material. And this keeps things very consistent. So you've got the object name in both the shader and the material, and when you export this object, nothing should have a default name.